Morning, everyone. It's Wednesday morning, and it's Tai Chi Saber. So anyone who's watching for the first time, this is a Tai Chi weapon. Actually, it's the same broadsword that most of the traditional arts use, Chinese weapon. It's sharp, or theoretically sharp on one edge, and the back of the blade, the spine, is actually not sharp. It's really for deflecting, or you can actually put your hand on it. Then here it is, the guard, the hilt, and then the handle. And I mentioned that the sword is actually kind of shaped like this. It's curved. The handle has this ergonomic handle that looks like the handle on a hammer. So it's really designed, and they were smart enough back in the day to create swords like this, and they've been around for hundreds of years, maybe longer, maybe I don't know how long it's been since they did this, but it's been several hundred years probably that they figured out that they needed the sword in a certain, the handle had to be a certain shape in order for you to stab straight out without actually having the sword go up. So it's kind of, I think, unique that they were able to figure that out. Okay, so when you hold the sword, you hold it in your left hand, you rest it here. It's like holding, you see the people in the military holding a rifle. It's kind of up against your arm like this, and it rests against your shoulder, okay? It's actually going to go into the right side, and we do that by transferring it to the right hand, and we can slice and chop, slice in different directions. We can bring it down, or we can stab. We can uppercut. We can take it to the back and come up, take it to the back and come up. So you see the sword is pretty versatile in direction. And it's your goal when you practice something like this to manipulate this blade so that you can cut and slice and poke and parry and do all these different techniques with it. And that's what they probably designed the movements for combat back in the day. We're not carrying these things around the streets, so it's really an apparatus that we use as an extension of our body to magnify the movements and actually the alignment, and there's aesthetics to it. And it's pretty interesting for people that have never actually picked up something like this. So anyways, there are lots of maneuvers, and we're going to go through the sequence. So anyone that knows this, has been following, can follow along for the first time, and then I'll do some fundamentals after that, because I want to get through the form first. So we start off in the feet, shoulder width. This is the Wu style Tai Chi Saber. We step up, and really the footwork and the posturing is consistent with many of the movements we do in the empty hand form. If you know the form, you can probably see the similarity and the consistency of the geometry of position. It does take some coordination, but it does take memory. Definitely takes some memory to learn this. Actually, the prerequisite to learning the apparatus is learning at least the empty hand form, so that you're familiar with the transition and actually the format or the way to learn and memorize a sequence. So I try to do it so that you can see the shifting of the weight and the importance of finishing the movements in a position, a posture. Waist cut. So that's the height of the blade. That's 45-degree pointing down. It's going to come back up. You go back, this is your neutral position, and you turn, here's your horse stance. And you go back up, and you push. You push the sword forward, as you step through. Waist cut again. Over the head, poke down, over the top, undercut, sit back, turn, slice up, sit back, poke, sit back, and push again. Okay, small step, skip step, over the head, and we're going to poke. Lift it over and turn. Drop down the other side, left, right, over the top, inside here, over the top, chop down, and we rest here. So that's actually a defensive position, and we step 1, 2, 3. Step out, cross behind, and sink. Turn. Switch stances. Find a vertical position. Go over the top and down. Sit back. So this happens again. So this footwork is something I went over before, and then we step up and poke with the left foot forward. So we sit back like repulse the monkey. You're going to step backwards. Now we did this earlier to the left, and then 1. So this is the 3rd time we're doing that footwork. And we step forward and poke. This is shoulder height. Sit back and stab down. Over the top and poke down. Sit back. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Step up, turn like this, diagonal flying, toe out, chop, divert, step up, poke, sit back, push forward to the neck. Here's the horse stance again. Step up, sit back, up, switch feet, diagonal flying. Okay, sit like this. Set this up so you withdraw the sword, cross behind, and poke or push. That's a willow palm. Step out, poke, sit back, cut to the right, switch to your left hand, cut to your left, back to your right, chop down into the corner, pull back, step, and cross. So this is the opposite side that we did on this corner. Now we're going to go into a horse stance. Parallel, poke, sit back. Okay, so we poke, we sit back and actually take it like this. Step out, 1, 2, 3, go under the leg, flick it up, bring it out, chop down. Turn. 1, this is your left hand. This is your right hand diagonal flying. Lift it up. 1, 2, 3. We go in, lift up, bring it down the other side, step down, brush, and chop. Put the hand back to square 1, turn, brush knee, and push. Bring the hand down, turn, bring this hand up, 1, 2, 3, and Okay, good. Deep breathing. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. So you can see the sword form is fairly long. It encompasses quite a few maneuvers. It's difficult to keep track of when you're first learning it because there's a lot of redundancy and there's a lot of movements that are so similar to the one that happened previously that you could lose track and lose sight of where you are in the form. It's very easy to get confused. In fact, normally I do this form facing that way, and I have to face this way doing it. So it shows you that if you're not paying attention to the space, you can get through the form without mixing up. But if you use the walls as a reference in the beginning, and then you lose that wall, you will be confused. So you really have to, and that's true with any form that you learn, that you have to have it referencing your body and in your system so that when you go through it, you're not really aware of the surrounding walls, but you're within your space. So when you turn, like when we start here, we always know that we're turning to this way, just like when we do the standard form. So that's just a natural course. You start with your left and you move over to your right. So once you get that moving, then you won't be as confused. But here again, it does take to do the whole sequence at speed that we were just doing it about 5 minutes. And 5 minutes is a pretty long time to do anything for most people that haven't done anything sequential like this. You learn 3 or 4 moves and you're already at your limit. Here you have to learn all these movements and go through it. So you can imagine when you're learning sequential type things, especially long sequences, what the brain has to go through to house all that information, then translate that information into the body, and then you have this thing in your hand, and you have to manipulate it, and you have to change directions and build a certain amount of motor skill. So you have sequential memory, you have coordination, then you have to build that synchronization. So there's a tremendous benefit, and I think there's nothing like it to build that kind of memory in the mind and the body. All right. So I think one of the things, when you go over the top and you shift your weight, you have to start to build the idea of how we move the legs and the body. So when we move, because most of the techniques require certain amount of body mechanics. So if we're turning in this direction and we're cutting up and we're sitting back and we're pushing forward and we're turning to the back and we're coming forward and sitting back and then getting sort of that timing to build dexterity and movement. So if you're going over the top, this happens a lot in the form. So it's a good idea to get these motions consistent. So now we know that the sword ends up here. Okay, if you look in the mirror, it's over the top there. And when we're over here, we're here. Then we drop it down and we turn in this direction and then drag it up if we're going forward and then push up when we step forward. Then when we resume. So you're building the footwork, the turn, the direction of the sword, and tracking it so you're balanced in that center line. So why in this forward position? Because if you're in this position, you have strength and stability. And it also gives you a chance to go this way, and then come up again. Okay, so really, it's building timing for stepping and slicing. Okay. When we're in this position and we move, this hand is like this. So you lead with the hand, you follow with the sword. You lead with the sword, you follow with the hand. Okay, you lead and follow. You chop. When you poke, there's a balance and it separates. You don't just poke like this, it doesn't feel right. Although when you step forward and you poke like this, it's off the back leg. When I'm off the front leg, it's like this. So there's a balance in form. And that's really one of the things that we develop an understanding for is balance and motion, center of mass, and the alignment of the body to create the aesthetics and the trueness of that alignment. So what are we aligning? We're aligning our ligaments, our tendons, and our joints. So there is a tremendous benefit in elongating the movement because now you're utilizing your musculature all the way from joint to joint. So what does that do? It keeps the ligaments and tendons supple and agile, and because you're using them, then the nutrients and the rebuilding of those joints will be, something that your system will do. Now, if you never use your joints and you're not reaching those limits, your joints are not going to be as healthy as they could be. And that's something that probably we don't pay attention to because we just assume that those joints are there and those ligaments and tendons are there. But if you don't manipulate them, you don't move them, that's really something that is really avoided and overlooked. Now, you could be lifting weights and you're working your ligaments, but it's a little bit different because it's kind of isolated. And the tendency when you're lifting and you're a little bit older is that you're going to strain and stress those joints. And that's not good because you produce some inflammation and so forth. This is fairly light. This thing weighs about 1.75 pounds. But when you extend it out like that, it does take a bit of strength to hold it up. But you can hold it like this without tensing your shoulder because you'll find a natural position based on the fact that there's a balance in position and you're balanced in position. In fact, I'm only holding this with 2 fingers. It doesn't really take any strength if you're holding it because you're utilizing leverage and balance. Okay. When I'm switching the sword from here to here, actually I'm just turning it and I'm just turning it. And it doesn't really require any strength because I've got accustomed to finding the balance point through the sensitivity of the hand. So when you maneuver a sword, there's a lot of dexterity built into your whole system. Whereas, you're not holding this like even though this is a handle, like a hammer, you don't hold it like you're gripping a hammer completely, although sometimes people hold the hammer and hit a nail with too much tension in the hand, and they're over gripping, and they really don't let the head of the hammer do its work. So when we soften and loosen the wrists, we actually allow the energy that's transferred from the body to the blade. So it's really something. If you use a knife at home in the kitchen, you know that you can't hold that knife too firmly in order to slice or to cut or to butter a piece of bread. It takes feeling, dexterity, and sensitivity. Try putting butter on a piece of toast with too much force. You're going to rip everything apart, and you're going to, not be effective with what you're trying to do. So the same thing applies to this. That's just some advice. When we're in a thrusting position like this and we do the downward posture, we have to squat down and end up here. When we poke, or if we step up, we're like this, and we poke, you see, you're in this sitting stance, and then you're in the, so when you chop and you poke, that's the action. If I turn, that's really how you would use the movement. But we're doing it virtually and creating a direction of movement. So that's really what we're doing. So we don't need to be forceful. We just have to be building integration. We have to build integration. So you have to set up each position. You notice when I went like this, I have to bring my hand to this position, and then this position, and then down. So there's phases of movement that you have to track and then thrust. And then here. So this is a neutral position, but when I go like this, this is solid, switch, and then I step. So there is a gracefulness in the movement, but it's also controlling your center, because when you step, it's just how you time that footwork so that you have a movement, a position, a step down, and a separation, and a change. These are all transitions that your body gets accustomed to. This position has to be known before you can go from here to here. So when you make your transition, which happens first? It's something that you have to build in from experience, and experience is part of the practice, because when you do things over and over again, you not only learn the movement, but then you learn the correctness of the timing. And by watching someone do it, and for this case, you're watching me, if you watch the movement, then you can see, well, the hand is moving and it's finishing at the same time. So that's the kind of imagery, or at least a transition that you pick up on visually. So the visual learning is very important. Then when you watch it enough, that's why the videos is very important. And, looking at a photograph isn't enough, because you don't see the changes. But if you watch a video often enough, what ends up happening is you impregnate that information in your brain from the visual recognition. Then you start to see it, and then the timing starts to formulate in the body. And then you look, and then you begin to replicate the movement. And this is how we learn. In fact, we probably don't pay attention to how we learn things, but in this case, because this is what I do, I teach, I have to get you to understand this is the process. And if you understand the process, whether it's learning this, first stage is learning the empty hand form. Once you've learned that process, then learning many things becomes easier. So that's just sort of building that format, the methodology and learning sequential type forms or sequential type events, really. Every movement is an event. When we start here, we start here. So you break it down into smaller bits, and then you can learn them. So whereas you could posture, you could posture, you could posture, you could posture. So that's finding those positions, and you kind of look at it, see what it feels like. If you're in this position and you're here, how do you know where the hand goes on the side? Right now I'm not looking, but I can go to the either side of this, because in this position I know where my hand is in relative to this position, right? So this is sort of dexterity that you develop over time, as where does the hand go? How does the sword know? How do you know the sword is out or in or out? This is how your body learns these things, and it's just amazing that it has this ability to adapt. Now, complex movement like we're doing is really very sophisticated on this learning curve, because it is something that our body has to go through and recognize, and then build, actually it's building neurons and building, all these little switches to create that action and movement. And it's doing it spontaneously and by itself, simply because you're giving it some information. So that's sort of, what happens when we're learning. It does happen between the mind and the body, and what you take in visually. And because I'm explaining it to you, you're taking this information in here too. But that information isn't as easy to, sort of diagnose or interpret, because you don't really know, just without the visuals, what I'm talking about. So just like if you were reading text only, and I said, well, the right hand goes to the vertical and horizontal, and the sword is doing this, you can't really see it simply by the text. So video is actually it's a very good tool to learn. Okay, now, from there, we'll go back to the beginning, okay, and we start off. Preparation is this. Stepping up like we do the first movement in the form, and we're like this. So this is like a neutral position or vertical elbow, horizontal elbow, sit back, turn the corner, and we separate the hands, step up. This is like beginning style, and we have grasp the sparrow's tail. And you hook your wrists, you turn, and then we go right into brush knee. Okay, so you can see, replicate the movement and the form sequence as you were doing the form. So it's very easy to do that if you know the first, but the difficulty is this arm, because you have to hold, if you're holding it too tight, then it's going to be stiff. So when you go up and you fold the elbow, forget about the fact that it's sitting in your arm because it has to maneuver. The only thing that you have to be aware of is that you don't, your thumb is here and your index finger is here, the two fingers are chopping it here. So you want to have a little bit of pressure so it's on the arm, so when you go like this and you go like this, that it doesn't flop around, because the tendency if you're holding it without any pressure on your arm, that blade is going to be wobbling all over the place, and that's not a good thing. It could be a little bit dangerous. You might hit yourself in the head. So when you fold, you want to be aware that there's some pressure on the sword from the relationship between this and this point of contact. And then when you're here, you have control of the sword. You see, so this actually becomes this unit. And because you're tying it together, it becomes something that, so, you know, you might even just stand there and practice doing that so that you have control. So if I do deep breathing, I'm doing that. Inhale. Exhale. So it's like it's not there, but you have to, you don't do exactly like you do. You wouldn't turn in deep breathing like that because the edge of the sword is facing your neck and you just don't want to do that. So you'd have to be aware that that has to happen. So, when you practice something like this, most of you probably don't have a sword at home, but, you do have, you can use a stick, get a little broomstick or a dowel, you can practice it like that. The only thing is you won't have an edge that you're utilizing. So when you're doing the movements, you can follow, but not necessarily have a good sighting of what we're using for cutting edge. The other thing you can do is just mimic the movement as if you're doing it with an imaginary sword, which is really a little bit tricky to do. But the thing is, once you've learned the form, you can actually practice the sequence without the sword, and you run through the motions because you've already dialed in the fact that the hands are going to be doing this and so forth, right? So the other movement that we might have a little trouble with is this. So find that position, lift this knee, turn out. Now here, look in the mirror. When I'm like this and I step over, you see I stepped over, I kind of cleared this. If I step here, I'm going to be in the way. I'm going to poke myself in the leg. So if I'm here, step a little bit to the side, and then the sword's going to come here. You see? And then when I step up and I turn to the back, I can chop over, and then I can sit back. So really, you have to pay attention to your body position and balance. So if I'm here and I cross over, this is your stance. Okay? If you go like this and you just do that, then your stance is going to be off and you went off in that direction. So footwork, is something that you could practice without this or use this, but just do those legs separately. Okay? The stepping up, sitting back, stepping up, sitting back, and turning might be something you practice. And we're doing this kind of thing anyways when we step. But now you see how important the 180-degree turn is. Because if I turn, or I turn, and I turn, there's your basic fundamental 180-degree turn. So, that was a bit of information for you to practice. I didn't want to go through too many things, but that covers a lot. Hope you enjoyed this. Give us a thumbs up. Go to YouTube. Go to calvinchin.com on the YouTube channel, and you can give us a thumbs up. Subscribing is important. We want to keep building viewership. The Tai Chi weapon is something that's pretty unique, and I don't think there's a lot of tutorials out there that are actually taking you through the form the way we're doing it. So this is done live, and anyone that's learned the form, hopefully that was helpful. Okay, so that's it for today. We're going to be back in about 15 minutes, and if you're following, you're welcome. We're going to be doing the Wudang Yet Hing Hormone system in about 15 minutes. Okay, see you there.